decade, Saturdays and Illegal Curve have been synonymous with one another. With insight, analysis, and interviews regarding the Winnipeg Jets, the Manitoba Moose, and all around the NHL, here are Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg, and your host, Drew Mindell. The Illegal Curve Hockey Show starts now.
Dave M., do you have the sniffles?
Allergies.
Hay fever, pollen, grass?
All of the above. I don't know.
All of the above. It's a tough time for Dave M., undoubtedly. Good morning, Winnipeg. Good morning, Manitoba. For all those joining us live this morning on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms, we say good morning, universe, and welcome to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show with Dave Minuk, the allergic one, with Ezra Ginsburg, the handsome one. I'm your host, Drew Mindell, the bald one, here to talk for the next couple of hours about the Winnipeg Jets, about the NHL, about the Stanley Cup playoffs, and whatever other nonsense comes to our minds. Good morning to you both, gentlemen. I hope you're doing well in the midst of this May heat spell that we're all experiencing. Hope the AC is running well in your respective homes.
I can't believe that you just mentioned that, Drew, because our AC is actually not working at our house. So last year it was water in the basement and having to get our foundation fixed. This year, well, that's what happens when you have a 70-year-old River Heights home, right? So yeah, we have no AC going, so we're going to have to call a heating and if anybody knows a good heating and air conditioning company, let me know, because yeah, I think it's going to be like 31 or 32. Got to start off by wishing Ariella, my daughter, happy 5th birthday. It was her actual birthday yesterday. As you guys know, she was born on an IC Saturday, 7/02, which obviously, I thought maybe I would still make the show that day, but Naomi thought otherwise. But both my kids are actually born on Saturdays, but got to get that in there. Happy birthday, Ariella. We had a great birthday party, but yeah, it was a backyard party yesterday, and there was a lot of schwitzing going on, let me tell you.
There you go. Glad to hear that you had a nice birthday party. Yes, happy birthday to Ariella. I didn't get my birthday party invite. I'll deal with that issue off air.
It's just a family party. Just a family party.
Happy birthday to Stu Smith.
Well, there you go. Happy birthday, Stu Smith. Also,
is celebrating his birthday with us. Thank you, Stu.
Yes, thank you, Stu. Also, a big happy birthday, of course, to our good friend Ken Weeb, celebrating for, I believe,
happy birthday, Kenny.
The 242nd time this year so far, although there haven't been 242 days in 2023 just yet. So getting a little bit ahead of myself, but happy birthday to all those are celebrating, and whatever else you're celebrating, maybe anniversaries, maybe good test results, whatever it might be. It's a celebratory Saturday here on the Illegal Curve.
It's definitely celebratory. Are you not going to put that comment? Like, how are we not going to address that comment from Bells? Brent Bellamy's watching in France. Is that real?
I just put it up. What do you mean? It's been up for was up for 10 seconds.
Oh, there you go. Seconds. Thank you, Brent. Welcome to the south of France. He writes one op-ed on the cover of the Free Press, and he has to immediately flee to the south of France.
The people who want to widen Kenniston are not happy with Brent, so he's fled into hiding right now.
Yeah,
and
the Heavy Construction Association has it out for Brent Bellamy, and he's heading to France as a result to stay safe.
Let's be honest, guys. I think being in the south of France is a lot better than ever being on Route 90, the way the traffic moves on that street. But yeah, good to have Brent listening from France, and hopefully he's having a good trip. I'm assuming it's a family vacation, or maybe it's something else. But yeah, it's probably a little bit nicer than where we are right now.
Yeah, well, it's beautiful here in Winnipeg. What are you talking about? It's stiflingly hot, but it's certainly enjoyable to live in the furnace for a little bit of
Drew,
time.
You've been in the south of France.
I've actually never been to the south of France. I've been to Paris, but I've never been to the south of France.
Dave's been there.
Drew, forget Paris.
Forget Paris? I can't. Billy Crystal. I enjoy it too much.
Dave was actually French kissing under the Eiffel Tower.
I was, but the south of France, very beautiful.
There you go. Okay, Dave M. with his travel tips. This is the usual nonsense as you'd expect.
Is it French kissing in France, Dave, or is it just kissing?
Just kissing, Ezzy.
Yeah.
You two guys are too much. Anyways, let's talk a little bit about the Winnipeg Jets. Not a lot going on in Winnipeg Jets land this week, as everybody is sort of, it's radio silence as everyone's sort of preparing for what will be the flurry of activity in and around the NHL once the Stanley Cup finals come to an end. And of course, those could start as early as what? If If Vegas wins tonight, they can start as early as Wednesday. Otherwise, it starts next Saturday. I think that's what the NHL came out and said. I really wasn't paying that much close attention to it. And nonetheless, from the Winnipeg Jets perspective, this is what I'm thinking about, in the lead up to the show. I wanted you guys to chime in. We know the names that could potentially be traded. We know Hellebuck, we know Dubois, we know Scheifele, we know Wheeler. From your perspective on the trade market, if the Jets are making a trade this offseason, what is the priority acquisition? Is it a center for a center if they trade one of Dubois or Scheifele, or is it maybe a stud defenseman to shore up things even further on the back end? If you had to pick one position, if you had to pick one thing that the Jets need to solidify this offseason in a trade, what is it in your minds? I'll start with you, Mr. Ginsburg.
Yeah, I think you won't be surprised because I've been talking about this for months, if not years, right? The need for another top pairing defenseman to go along with Josh Morrissey. But I think it's not as simple as just one position, because it depends also who else is being traded or how many of these players are being traded, right, Drew?
Right,
because you just mentioned it, right? Like, I think when you're talking about Dubois or Scheifele, you would have to think a center is coming back the other way, just because we've talked about this, over the last several months, or at the very least the last couple of weeks, right? Like, if you're going to be trading your top two centers, and Dave M has talked about this, it's very unlikely that you're going to have the top two centers traded around the same time. That's why, we've talked about the potential for a guy like Scheifele either signing an extension or possibly being traded at next year's deadline, right? March 2024. But I think, it's very interesting if you throw in like Connor Hellebuck, for example. Like, I'm on the record as saying that the Jets should hang on to Hellebuck if they're going to be going for it. And every indication is this Jets team wants to make the playoffs next year and go on a run, right? So I think, trading Hellebuck, like, why would you trade, if not the best goalie, a top three goalie in the league, right? And the obvious answer to that would obviously be because he's got 1 year left on his contract, and his next contract's going to be, between $9 and $10 million a year, we think, right? He might even be asking for more than $10 million a year. And to be honest with you, he's entitled to that when you're nominated for the Vezina 3 of the last 5 years, right? So going back to what you were saying about positional players, Drew, like, I think when you look at this defense, I think it's a good group of defensemen, like Brendan Dillon and Nate Schmidt being acquired a few years back. They've solidified the top six, but there's kind of like too many kind of third and fourth defensemen on this team. That's the way I view it. And, obviously the strength is on the right side, and you're going to have a decision to make coming up with Ville Heinola and Declan Chisholm, right? Like, both of these guys, Dave would agree, are NHL ready. But I mean, there's only so many spots on the left side when you have Josh Morrissey and Brendan Dillon and Dylan Sandberg there, right? So because you have like a Nate Schmidt contract, for example, congratulations to Nate Schmidt, by the way. He recently had, I think it was a baby girl with his wife. So congratulations. But like, you look at a guy like Schmidt and, his contract status or Brendan Dillon's contract status, like, is this the year, Dave, that you move one of those guys out? I don't know. But there's no doubt that when you're talking about Dubois and Scheifele, you have to have a center coming the other way, because when you're talking about Cole Perfetti, for example, we know that he's missed a lot of hockey over the last couple of years, but they might view him more as a winger, in the short to medium term, right, Dave? So I still think the Jets need that, kind of top pairing defenseman, but I don't know if now is the time to trade, Scheifele for a defenseman, or like I've used the Ryan Johansson, Seth Jones, for example, right? Like, Nashville had a lot of good defensemen, so they traded Seth Jones and they needed a center, right? So it's kind of the opposite for the Jets, right? But I still think that, put it this way, if you're just going to be swapping centers, you'd make the argument, you're not really getting better. You're just replacing what you're trading, right? So it'll be interesting to see, how many of these guys get traded, because obviously the big ones are Dubois and Scheifele. That's what everybody's focused on, in addition to Hellebuck. But I think, Hellebuck, I've said this before, I think it's, the chance of him being moved is less than those two guys. But I just think a center has to come back. So in that sense, Drew, you're not really, improving other areas of your team. You're just replacing the player you're trading.
Yeah, I mean, look, Ezzy, I think you make some valid points there. It's just, watching these playoffs, Dave, and watching, it's the old cliche, but the NHL is undoubtedly a copycat league. Do you think that, watching, the final four teams here, that the Jets are sort of taking anything from watching these 4 teams and maybe trying to extrapolate that into how they can move forward this offseason and to how they can move forward, with retooling their roster. It's evident that they're not interested in a rebuild, at least for another year. They're not interested in a rebuild. Maybe that changes their tune if depending on what happens next season, but that it's going to be more of a retooling than anything else. So, from your perspective, is there sort of similar question to what Ezzy was addressing? What's priority for the Jets from your perspective? And then subsequent to that, watching Vegas, watching Florida, watching Dallas, watching Carolina, do you think the Jets are watching those teams and trying to mimic them in any way moving forward?
Not really. I mean, maybe Carolina and their goal scoring was out, but I mean, they were missing 2 of their best players. So it's easy to be like, well, they couldn't score goals. Well, 2 of their best players.
And Jacob Slavin in game 4, right?
Right. But I'm just saying that for, they haven't had Pacioretty or Svechnikov for the majority of the latter part of the season, or not for the latter part of the season, I should say. So, I mean, I saw, the suggestion that the Jets should emulate the Florida Panthers. It's like, what? They should emulate a team that lost, 30 points in the standings and was the Chicago Blackhawks win away against the Pittsburgh Penguins of not making the playoffs, or a Brad Marchand breakaway goal in game 5 to being knocked out in the first round. I mean, Sergei Bobrovsky is playing out of his mind. He wasn't even the starting goaltender. So I think you always have to take it with a grain of salt. I mean, some would say, well, I've seen the arguments. I've seen a lot of revisionist history, I think that a lot of people are arguing that the Florida Panthers needed to take a step back and learn how to play hockey. Well, or you could just have a goaltender who's playing out of his mind. And, I think I right now, Sergei Bobrovsky's numbers are like 4th best all time for a goalie since they started tracking certain stats. So that
his goals saved above expected, Dave, is like it was 18. Like that's just absurd, right?
No, that's what I mean. So I'm just saying, like, you always have to take it. Like, and look, Jake Ottinger hasn't played particularly well in Dallas, and Jason Robertson wasn't scoring, and Ottinger plays a great game, and Jason Robertson scores. Well, okay, they win the game, but so I like I said, I always take whatever teams do in the playoffs. I understand the NHL is a copycat league and on all that jazz. But getting to your point, Drew, and getting to your question, I mean, it really becomes a function of what are you doing with this team? I mean, if you're going to just retool, right, then if you're the Winnipeg Jets, you're not trading Connor Hellebuck. You're not trading Mark Scheifele. The only guy you're really trading is Pierre-Luc Dubois. And in that instance, you need to get back a center to play center. No, I would actually argue that in that mind, if you're going to commit to Mark Scheifele and you're going to commit to Connor Hellebuck, and forget about Blake Wheeler for right now, but if you're going to commit to those 2 and maintain those guys as part of your core, then you trade Pierre-Luc Dubois. And I'm with Ez. I think what you do is you augment that group so Connor Hellebuck is going to be better, buttressed against the opposing team. So to me, what we've always talked about is make Josh Morrissey your 1A, but you bring in a bona fide number 1 defenseman. And that's what this team has needed for a long time. On the right side,
who plays a different style than Morrissey, or
no? You want a big physical defenseman who can clear the front of the net, and you don't need an offensive defenseman because Josh Morrissey is an offensive defenseman. You need a guy who is responsible, who can obviously make a good first pass and get the puck out of the zone, but you also want a guy who can control the front of the net the way the Jets oftentimes do not control the front of their net. So you have that
Vegas style where they basically say, make it impossible.
I mean, look at what I mean. If you want to talk about playoff hockey, look at the way the playoffs are gone. Right, the teams that are having success are the teams that can control the front of the net and not allow chances from these high danger areas, which the Jets aren't necessarily doing the best job of. So to me, if you can have that top pairing right side defenseman beside Josh Morrissey, and you can have Dylan DeMello in your 2 spot, and you can have Neil Pionk in your 3 spot, or I don't care, flip them, have Pionk in the 2 and Dylan DeMello, and then have Nate Schmidt either with the team as a 7, because you need depth. I mean, ultimately, you're going to need depth. And then you're going to have to figure out what you do with, like I said, you're going to, unfortunately, it seems likely that Ville Heinola is probably in the minors next year, but that all depends on what his schedule is going to look like. Right. But I'm just saying,
and also what happens at training camp, right, Dave? Like training camp, we talked about it. Like the train, like, you don't want to say like training camp is going to be more important for certain players. But I think Heinola would be at the top of the list of guys that you would say have the most to prove at training camp. You would agree with that, right, Dave? And obviously, when I say training camp, I mean preseason games as well, because we know preseason games are meaningless. But for a guy like Heinola, who basically has gone up and down from the NHL and the AHL, I mean, depending on how he plays in training camp and preseason, he could crack the roster, right, Dave? But I just wanted to, sorry, I'm kind of, stealing your thunder here, Dave M, but, like Kenny Wiebe, our good friend, wrote an article for sportsnet.ca about a possible trade with the Hurricanes, right? Like,
I was going to pivot to that, yes.
Well, and so like the guy that obviously comes to mind is Brett Pesce, right? Like that's a guy that I think a lot of fans have looked at, and they've looked at that right side because you've got Brent Burns, Julian Chatfield. I thought Chatfield was very impressive actually in the playoffs. I think he's a defenseman. I mean, he's a third pairing guy, so he's a guy that not a lot of people know about, but I thought he showed very well in the playoffs, and I'm assuming he was pretty good in the regular season as well. But like whether you're talking about Josh Pesce or like another guy you guys know I really like, who I was definitely in favor of the Jets acquiring a couple of years ago, is Josh Manson, right? Son of Dave Manson, obviously former Jet 1.0. But the thing is, like, you're a Dubois for, like, that's where this gets complicated, right, Dave? Like, it's not, if you're trading, Dubois for a right side defenseman, you got to get a defenseman on a higher tier than that. Like, all due respect to Josh Manson and Brett Pesce, when you're talking about Dubois, you're talking about a 1A, 1B center, right? And then the question becomes, who is filling Dubois' role up the middle for you next year on the Jets? Like, are you going to elevate Adam Lowry to second line center behind Scheifele? Like, could Perfetti play second line center? Is Vladislav Nemesnikov? Like, that's why I think, it's really hard to see Dubois being traded without getting a good center in return. Not a prospect, but a guy that can actually play next year.
Well, let me ask you guys this. The UFA crop this offseason is not very good. I mean, I'm being blunt. The UFA crop, yeah, exactly. You're being more blunt, but yes. So if the Jets, who have all these attractive assets potentially available in a trade, does that increase their value? Because you can't really dip into free agency and make a big splash. I mean, teams are going to sign these players, but they're likely going to overpay, and they're likely going to regret it, because we know that July 1st is always inflationary, and bad decisions often happen on July 1st. So if you're the Jets, do you maybe have a little bit extra leverage in any potential trade negotiations, because teams can't go and just acquire a player in free agency that's really going to make a significant impact?
Yeah, it's a good point you make. I think you know the answer, Drew, and I think you'll agree with me, right? Like it's yes for sure, because there's no Mark Scheifele and Pierre-Luc Dubois that are UFAs, right? Like Ryan O'Reilly's a UFA, right? But I mean, obviously, O'Reilly's going to get a huge salary. I mean, not that Scheifele and Dubois won't on their next contracts, but O'Reilly's a guy that obviously has a Conn Smythe, a little bit older. Right. I think he's 1 or 2 years older than Scheifele. But I mean, the reality is, though, you're getting a guy potentially that you have control of for that bonus year, right? And that's the big thing. When you're talking about Dubois, I'm sure that, if he doesn't sign a 1-year deal with the Jets, which is always a possibility, and, the more and more I thought about it, I mean, I wouldn't be completely shocked. I don't think that's an ideal situation, guys. Like, I don't think you want to have how many players can you have that are pending UFAs, right, Dave? Like, I don't think you're going to go into next season with Scheifele, Dubois, Wheeler, and Hellebuck all as pending UFAs. And that's why we think at least one of these core four are going to be traded, if not 2 or 3, right? But you're absolutely right, Drew. I think, when you're looking, like, how excited are you getting for Dmitry Orlov? Like, if that's your top, like we talked about Ryan O'Reilly, just checking here, you've got Patrick Kane, you've got Matt Dumba, who else do you have out there? Like, it's just not a very good crop. Like, obviously, there's going to be some players, like you said, that get signed to big deals, but Tyler Bertuzzi is a guy that I liked as an option for the Jets, but he's a winger. So I don't like, the Jets have a lot of wingers when you're talking about Connor and Ehlers and Niederreiter and so on, right? So I do think it gives the Jets an advantage, and I do think there's going to be a lot of teams that are after these players. I mean, when you're talking about Connor Hellebuck, I think it's possible you could have 10 teams that are interested in him. But even when you're talking about a guy like Scheifele, I think there's going to be a lot of teams that have seen, what he's done. And even though he's not a very good defensive player, I think they would, definitely be interested in acquiring a player like that.
Well, let me ask you this. You mentioned Connor Hellebuck. So we've seen the goaltending, in these playoffs, and in the Final Four here, entering the Final Four teams, you would have said that Jake Ottinger, based on recent performance, is the best of the goaltenders. Well, he's been pretty terrible for Dallas. Sergei Bobrovsky, as Dave mentioned, has been a backup at various times this year. He's on this incredible heater. We know what Vegas has been doing with their goaltending all year. We know what Carolina often goes inexpensive with their goaltending. Does that maybe change? Connor Hellebuck is a tremendous regular season goaltender? Does that maybe diminish his value in the trade market because of goalies being such, a goalie can go through a bit of a slump, and and it can happen at the worst times, and it can happen really with no warning, let's say, because Hellebuck wasn't great during the first round against Vegas. Now, a lot of people would say it's because of the defense in front of him wasn't great as well. He made the first save, and any sort of rebound was Johnny on the spot for Vegas to take advantage of. So does that maybe change teams' thinking as it pertains to acquiring a goaltender of the regular season status of Connor Hellebuck?
If I'm the Carolina Hurricanes, I don't think so. If I'm the Carolina Hurricanes and I'm in win now mode, I would rather have, and commit to Connor Hellebuck, even if he doesn't sign an extension for you. You'll take Connor Hellebuck at $6 million if you're Carolina, even though they're notorious for not spending a lot of money on netminders.
Right.
And they'll have Kochetkov coming up and playing with, he was the guy who scored against the Moose here when he was playing for the Chicago Wolves. But he's the goaltender of the future. I think he played he didn't play that many games. He played a bunch of games in the NHL, though, for Carolina, but he's the goaltender of the future after his first year. I saw that Andrei Svechnikov was in the Carolina Hurricanes end of season stuff, was doing some translating for him, which was actually rather humorous. Although the best was it's always funny with Russian players because you can always tell almost all of them speak English.
Yeah,
and then at the end,
just pretend.
Well, they do. And they, so Svechnikov's asked, and then at the last question, something about learning English. And all of a sudden he just switches to English and he sounds totally fine. But anywho, the point is, if I'm Carolina and I'm in win now mode and they have a defense that they've got, which is one, as he always talks about the Carolina Hurricanes defense, if you've got that defense in front of Connor Hellebuck and you're not going to play Connor Hellebuck 65 games, because all the science, all the research is showing that guys need to play 55 to 58 games to really be optimal, to be fresh. So you say to Connor Hellebuck, I get that you want to play 65 to 70 games. Who cares what you want? Because if you want to be a Stanley Cup champion, then it's optimal for the best for the team to have a competent backup netminder who can take the load off of you and give you the optimal number of starts to keep you fresh, keep you in your mode, and get you ready for the playoffs. So to me, if I'm the Carolina Hurricanes, I would absolutely be all in on Connor Hellebuck, even without an extension, simply because it gives you an opportunity to, try and win now, which is exactly what the Hurricanes want to do.
And we should mention, guys, that, for those who, I know you guys obviously know, and a lot of people, watching the show live and on the podcast will know, but for those who didn't read Kenny's article who don't know, Frederik Andersen and Antti Raanta are both pending UFAs. Right. So that's why Hellebuck makes a lot of sense. I mean, we have no idea if the Jets and Hurricanes have talked or if Hellebuck's even going to be available. But I just thought I'd mention that both Andersen and Raanta, their top two goalies, are UFAs and are probably not coming back.
This year in Carolina, they spent $6.5 million. That was their budget on Andersen and Raanta. Hellebuck, we know, is at $6.1 million, and Kochetkov is under contract. He signed a sort of I think a 5-year or a 4-year, $8 million contract extension. So it's not like it's really a huge increase in what Carolina spends this year on goaltending. They generally go low budget-wise on their goaltending. So Hellebuck would certainly fit in there. Kochetkov at $2 million. So instead of paying $6.5 million for Andersen and Raanta, you're paying $6.1 million plus the $2 million for Kochetkov.
Yeah, but you're willing to eat that if you can have a goaltender of Connor Hellebuck teaching your goaltender of the future.
Right.
Giving him that opportunity to learn and become a better goaltender himself. And then you're prepared. Now, I think this was his first year in North America. So he now will have an opportunity to learn with Connor Hellebuck, back him up, and then maybe again, obviously, who knows what could happen. Maybe you sign him, maybe you don't. It depends on how the season goes. But reality being that maybe if you're Carolina, who we do know has a good goaltending prospect pool. I'm not particularly familiar with it, but I remember from years ago, they did have a good one, that maybe it's something that you're prepared to do.
Well,
what about the fact that Eden Hill is a pending UFA? I mean, obviously the Golden Knights are going to re-sign him, but how crazy is that, right? Like, the Golden Knights are one win away from getting to the Stanley Cup final. You have a goaltender who's obviously in Bobrovsky, who's one of the highest paid goalies in the league. And then it's just funny because I thought I would just mention it because we've talked about like all the good goalies, like all the Vezina Trophy finalists were knocked out in the first round, right? It's been kind of the year of the comeback goaltender, right? With Bobrovsky and Eden Hill. I just think that's funny because Eden Hill is going to get a big pay bump.
it's been the year, I mean, with the exception of Bobrovsky, of course, but it's been the year of let's make our goaltenders' lives easier by putting a stacked defense in front of them. Which makes a lot of sense. So then, for some of these teams, which obviously have high quality defense, if you can then add another goaltender of elite status in Connor Hellebuyck, then I think you're really feeling as though you're confident with what you're going with. I mean, there's a reason why Kenny, and maybe we'll link it in the chat so people, if they haven't been able to see it yet, why Ken wrote an article almost directly.
It's in the morning papers. They can link it there.
There you go. It's on illegalcurve.com. Check out the morning papers. Sorry, Dave.
You need those clicks.
That. But there's an article really where Ken's playing Monty Hall. Let's make a deal between the Jets and the Carolina Hurricanes. Because of it seems to be the some pieces that fit there. Whether it be goaltending, whether it be another top line forward, be it Scheifele or be it Dubois. Because what's Carolina? I mean, now Carolina, of course, got to the Final Four. They did so without two of their best goal scorers in Svechnikov and Pacioretty. But does that mean that they want to go out and they want to further augment that? Do they want to further insulate their team? I mean, Mark Scheifele doesn't strike me as a fit for the Carolina Hurricanes with their insistence on defensive responsibility, but doesn't Pierre-Luc Dubois sort of sound like he could fit there potentially? He seems like way more of a Hurricanes player than Mark Scheifele does. Just interesting the ties that bind as we're rapidly approaching the end of the 2023 season, and then the silly season with the free agency and the draft and the trade market heating up, everything else like that rapidly approaching as the calendar flips from May to June this coming week. When we come back, more Jets talk. Scott Billick, our good friend, he joins us on the show coming up next. But before we go to break, I want to make mention, of course, the upcoming Rady Jewish Community Center, the Rady JCC annual sports dinner is coming up on Monday, June the 19th. It's going to be featuring 3 classic members of the Chicago Blackhawks, Chris Chelios, Ed Belfour, Jeremy Roenick. Illegal Curve is proud to be one of the sponsors of the Rady JCC 49th annual sports dinner. Tickets available currently, radyjcc.com. Get them soon. I know it's selling rapidly. I know tickets are going to be out in the mail. So if you're wavering, it's one of the best dinners on the events calendar in Winnipeg. You get to hear from Chelios, Roenick, and Ed Belfour with a free microphone. Is going to be a wild experience. Tickets available, radyjcc.com. We'll be there. We hope to see you there as well.
Great sports auction, as you guys know. There's always some unbelievable NFL, NHL, MLB, NBA merchandise, and also, not sure, I don't know if I've mentioned this to you guys yet, each one of us is going to be paired up. There's 3 members of Illegal Curve, 3 former Chicago Blackhawks. So Dave M's obviously going to go with Hall of Fame defenseman Chris Chelios. I'll be tipping a few back with Eddie the Eagle, and Drew will be spending the night with Jeremy Roenick.
Yeah, not a word of what Ezzy just said is true. In fact, the Blackhawks have written it in their contract to avoid us at all causes. But the part about the merchandise, and if you're a memorabilia hunter, this is the place to be.
Dave can party with Chelly.
When we come back, Scott Billick is going to join us Saturday morning. It's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Don't go anywhere.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hi, Ez. A strange question for you. But why are you lying on the ground being crushed by a piano?
Well, Drew, I definitely tried to carry this baby grand piano down the stairs by myself, and somehow I failed miserably.
Right. Yeah, I'm sorry. That was a silly question on my part. My apologies. Would you like me to call Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage to help you move the piano? They are the most experienced piano moving company in Winnipeg, after all.
Yes, please call Rolly's and hurry. This piano is very, very heavy.
Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage offers stress-free residential moving services while taking great care of your personal belongings, including your piano. At Rollies, no job is too big or too small. For more information, visit rollies.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go...
We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs from restorative to cosmetic dentistry and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly, see lindenmarketdental.com.
Boston Pizza harnessed Fanalytics to help optimize no-look dipping. Ooh, making adjustments so you can stay focused on the game. The playoffs at Boston Pizza, powered by Fanalytics.
Half past the hour. Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mindell, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg. Hopefully somebody can track down our good friend Scott Billick. He's going to join us momentarily for some additional Jets talk as we are getting closer and closer to the end of the Stanley Cup playoffs. And
Scotty texted me. He's just running a few errands, so we'll have to find out what those errands are. Maybe he's, doing some birthday present shopping. I have no idea, but we'll have to find out.
Okay, fair enough. Like, is he coming onto the show, or is he just ignoring us and doing the errands instead?
He basically, Scotty texted me and said, listen, I love you guys. I love joining you guys on Saturday mornings, but I'm going to run these errands. They're more important. No, Scotty said he's going to sign in basically in the next couple minutes. So
okay, fair enough. We can accept that from Scotty. What I did want to make mention is that I had a great meeting and a great lunch yesterday with the good folks from Boston Pizza, Andrew specifically from Boston Pizza. And I can't say too much just yet, folks. But what I can little tease you with for the upcoming season, for the 23-24 season, is that you'll be seeing a lot more of us in person at your local Boston Pizza. So just keep that in the back of your mind.
Fish bowls for Spency and I.
More details to come as we get closer to the start of the next season, but you'll see a lot more of the three of us and our three mugs at your local Boston Pizza. More details to come when this season begins, but always appreciate the support of our good friends from Boston Pizza. Also appreciate the support from our good friend, Scott Billick, who is looking at something more interesting off camera rather than me.
I'm trying to retweet your tweet.
Oh, you're trying to retweet my tweet. Yeah. I appreciate that. Thank you. That's very nice of you.
Also, Scott, that was really quick that you got back from Pet Value or whatever you were running your errands.
Nature called. That's yeah.
Coffee worked its magic a little bit quicker than you expected it to. Is that what I can?
I just started the coffee, so
okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, you guys need coffee mugs, and then I would. Do you have coffee mugs?
We don't have coffee mugs.
Okay,
we're more beer style.
I've got my Contigo here. I'm rocking the Contigo.
Branded coffee mugs.
This is the brand. I'm rocking the K&R one. So
yeah,
that's a beauty.
The chattel, so it even says "wake up" or whatever on it. So
there you go.
Anyway,
how do I get one of those from the Kenny and Rennie shop?
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know if they still have them. I mean, these are a couple years old now. But anyways, yeah.
Good morning, Scott.
Scotty's just rubbing it in now. He's just rubbing it in that he's got a K&R mug.
That's right. That's right. This is exclusive.
The coffee tastes better out of that, doesn't it?
Yeah. Everything tastes good right now. So
that's
great.
Yeah. That's good. Sunshine and rainbows for everybody. How are you, my friend? It's been haven't seen you since in the last little bit. Things are going well?
Things are well, yeah. It's not a lot of hockey. So that's been it's been a nice break, let's say. It's been nice just to kind of watch like the playoffs and whatever and kind of just enjoy the game rather than just kind of covering it and whatever. So yeah, that's been good. And then Bombers and Sea Bears.
Yes,
the Winnipeg
tonight.
Sea Bears, the opener tonight. So I'll be at that. But
biggest crowd in CEBL history.
Yes.
Downtown Winnipeg tonight.
Yes, yeah, but by a lot too.
Yeah,
probably by in the end, I'm guessing by about 3,000 fans. So yeah, it's pretty cool. It never ends with sports around here.
No, and
never a lull. So.
Which we'd like to announce the debut of the illegal screen basketball show. That's going to be coming up later on this morning. No, I'm joking. I know nothing about. I'm actually one of the. I'm embarrassing bad at basketball.
Isn't your wife like a University of Kentucky alum or something like that? Like, isn't basketball their thing?
It is their thing, and I love UK and everything else, but I cannot for the life of me. Like, my son loves basketball, so we'll be outside, shooting hoops, and it's like I have no touch whatsoever when it comes to basketball. It's just like, it's actually embarrassing. I don't know why, but
you don't dribble with two hands, though, right? You still dribble with one hand.
I still dribble with one hand. Yeah, I can dribble with one hand, but I can't shoot for the life of me. And in any event, I don't think the good people at the Sea Bears are calling me up to join the.
He's no Dave Minuk. Dave's like the Kyrie Irving of Winnipeg.
Hopefully, maybe a little, maybe a little less racist or something, in an ideal world. But
is he racist? Okay, I didn't know that. Let's pick a different player. Michael Jordan.
I was going to say Kyrie's quite anti-Semitic, actually.
Yeah, I was going to say that, has he?
But okay, I didn't know that.
Okay. I did not know that. That's not good. That's not funny.
It's okay, Scott. So am I.
Scotty, let's get.
We'll call B'nai B'rith after the show.
You mentioned watching the playoffs, and we were talking about this before, and watching the final four teams. Is there anything that you think the Jets are watching these four teams do and saying that's something we need to emulate, or that's something that we need to factor into our postseason, off-season plans and the roster changes and things like that? Or do you think that it's just I know, because we talked about it. It's a copycat league. One team does something, they succeed with it. Every other team decides that has to be the model we follow. Do you think the Jets are adopting that approach in any way, or do you think the Jets are still sort of off on their island, still trying to squeeze something out of something that many people would say is officially empty?
Well, it's funny you say that, because I kind of say that I wonder that to myself every year. Like, every year you get deeper into the playoffs, you see how difficult it is to win, right? Like, even I understand that Florida swept the Carolina Hurricanes, but that wasn't, your traditional sweep in that sense, right? I mean, you look at Vegas.
Not according to Rod Brindam or Scotty.
No, I know. That's what I mean. Like, I mean, but to me, it's just if. The Jets are missing a lot of what you're seeing from these teams, right? Like, just the relentless kind of pressure that you need to keep up game after game after game, right? The accountability. Like, you listen to Vegas, and after losing to Dallas in Game 4 a couple nights ago, and you kind of that's how a team should respond after losing, right? Like, you're up 3-0 and you still want, you don't think you were the better team on the night, or you didn't want it enough, or whatever. Like, you say the right things. And, one of the things about the Jets that I always felt was they just never really said the right things, especially when it came to the playoffs, right? It was always seemed to be kind of damage control instead of kind of really owning up to what they didn't do, or we were close, and close doesn't cut it in the playoffs. I mean, just ask Rod Brindamore, right? Like, and the Hurricanes. It doesn't matter if you're, arguably even the better team in the series, analytically and all that, you still lost, and you lost in 4 games. So it takes a special breed of team to kind of make it this far and to keep going. I mean, look at Vegas. I mean, they're doing it with no goaltender really to speak of. I mean, they've had great goaltending, but they're getting, I mean, that's the thing, right? Like, there's heroes across the board for all of these teams, whether it's Matthew Tkachuk or Brandon Montour in that one game playing nearly an hour of ice time. Like, you can always look at a team that's winning and see like moments of miracles and moments of, just heroic efforts and stuff like that. And, when I look at the Jets team, and like, how do you kind of, it's hard to compare because the Jets just don't have a lot of those things right now. You can look at Florida or Vegas or Dallas or whatever, and you can see like, specific identities for each of these teams, which the Jets don't really have. And these teams, when they lose, and obviously Florida hasn't lost a lot since the first round, but you can see kind of how they react to it. I mean, you can see how Vegas reacted, like I mentioned earlier, how Dallas is reacting to it, right? Like, trying to be unfazed by being 3-0 down and putting up their best, probably their best effort of that series in Game 4 to keep it going, right? And you look at the Jets in the first round, and they're down 3-1, and their worst effort came in the game that eliminated them. So, to me, it's just the Jets don't have that. I don't know. Maybe heart is the word, the lack of a better term, but they're not built like a playoff team. I think that's maybe one of the things that you'll look at Florida and Paul Maurice's team and say, yeah, I mean, they squeaked in during the regular season, and arguably they were a Pittsburgh Penguin or a Chicago Blackhawks goal away from not even being in the playoffs, right? And then, but you can look at Florida and you're like, man, these guys are built to play in the playoffs. Like they're relentless on the forecheck. I mean, obviously they've been pretty lucky with injuries and all that. But they just have that tenacity of a playoff team, and it's so consistent from them. Which is it's I mean, that's a whole different conversation altogether, because we didn't always see this with Paul Maurice's Winnipeg Jets. But I mean, I think at the end of the day, the Florida Panthers under Paul Maurice just have all their players pulling in the same direction. And that's, again, another thing that the Jets don't have is not everybody, what did Rick Bowness say? Teams or players kind of going off on their own and that sort of thing throughout the year. Again, I think for you to kind of get to where these teams are right now, everybody's got to be pulling in the right direction. And again, that's another issue with the Jets too. So there's a lot of them, right? There's a lot of things that the Jets are missing, from personnel to kind of an established kind of identity and a way to play. And kind of bolstering your roster with those types of players and that sort of thing. So there's that on top of it. But yeah, I mean, I just watch these games and I'm like, I'm sure people in the chat too watch these games and think, the Jets are probably, quite a ways from this kind of level of play that's required to. Mm-hmm. And when's the last time we really saw that? I mean, 2018. Right. I mean, that's probably the last time that we really saw this team kind of be able to kind of handle that, have an identity. I mean, you look at Game 7 of of the second round against Nashville. I mean, you could see a Jets team. It was just a kind of a heavy team to play against. They were, they were dogged in their pursuit of winning that. And obviously it went kind of south in the Western Final and whatever. But like the Jets just haven't gotten back to that in a playoff series. And in a, really in a season, in my opinion.
It's like you said, Scotty, right? Like, I think there's some parallels between the Jets and the Oilers and the Leafs, right? When you talk about the core four of all of these teams, right? Obviously, the Oilers are different in the sense that Draisaitl and McDavid are the two best players in the world. But when you're talking about the Leafs with Marner, Matthews, Tavares, Nylander, and you could throw in, some other talented players as well, like Riley. But I think you're right when you say that what it takes to win in the playoffs, we say this every year, but there's less penalties called. It's more about one-on-one battles. It's more about how teams adapt, right? And you could look at the Boston Bruins at, what did they have, 125 points, and then they get knocked out in the first round. So, I mean, it's a reminder that just because you have the best team on paper, that means absolutely nothing. It's who is willing to sacrifice, block shots, do whatever it takes. And like the Florida Panthers momentum has been building since that first round against the Bruins, right? Like they just seem like that quote unquote team of destiny this year. But I wanted to go back to the Carolina Hurricanes and just take a few moments to have a couple of coughs. We don't want you coughing.
I muted myself.
So. There you go. Yeah. Good use of the mute button, Scotty. Yeah. But I wanted to go back to Hurricanes, right? Because we were talking about that. And, it's another year of disappointment with the Hurricanes, right? And you can't not mention Max Pacioretty and Andrei Svechnikov, because those are two top players, especially when you're talking about Svechnikov, because obviously Pacioretty didn't play a lot during the regular season. But when you talk about the Hurricanes, we know that Antti Ranta and Freddie Anderson are both pending UFAs. Like, do you see a possible trade? I realize that's the big $64,000 question, because trading Hellebuck a year ago would have seemed absurd, right? But like, Do you see Carolina being a team that would really go hard after Hellebuck? And what would your return be? Like, you see Marty Necas, Brett Pesci's in the conversation. Like, could Seth Jarvis, the Winnipeg kid, could he be involved? Like, what's your take on the possible Jets Hurricanes deal here?
Well, I mean, anything that the Hurricanes do that's big starts with Tom Dundon, their owner, right? Like, the philosophy in Carolina, and you can go back and read all the Carolina writers write about this, but they're not willing to overspend on players.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes they're not really willing to kind of even, go all in and spend a lot of assets to buy a lot of things, right? Especially at the trade deadline. Like, one of the questions that came out of the Carolina Hurricanes losing in the Eastern Final there was, should they have done more at the trade deadline? I mean, to kind of find a goal scorer. I mean, obviously, with Svechnikov out and even Pacioretty, I mean, he didn't really play a lot this season, but it was losing Svechnikov, they lost their goal scorer, and they were able to defense their way through the first couple of rounds because that's how good they are. I mean, that team is the best defensive team in the NHL, in my opinion. But when it came to they needed that goal, they needed that kind of goal scorer on the team. They didn't really, end up finding it, and so. I think one of the things with Carolina is they don't really need the best goalie in the world. And so I do wonder if that's something that they would even entertain, because this team is just so good defensive with guys like Burns and Slavin. I mean, we can go down like Pesci, obviously, is one of them. I mean, you just go down the list. This team has built an all-world kind of defense. So, but I think there's room for a guy like Mark Scheifele potentially. But again, I think word also travels around this league quickly, and you don't really have to even word. You can just watch. Like, can Carolina bring in a Mark Scheifele? And here's the other thing. Like, I mean, does Carolina want to just overspend, I guess, for 1 year of Mark Scheifele? Are they even willing to kind of commit long term to a guy that's obviously a proven goal scorer and a proven a playoff contributor when he's healthy in the playoffs or not getting suspended? There's those things. So, I mean, to answer your question, yeah, like I'm sure there's possibilities, right? But I mean, I think when you're thinking about the Carolina Hurricanes, what they wanted, I think, at one point was Nikolai Ehlers, right? Like, they're looking for, that again, another sort of almost playmaker that can score. That would fit into their kind of analytic heavy kind of system. Like,
sorry, Scott, I forgot to mention that Ehlers is untouchable.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, and I understand that too. So, so is there a big trade with Carolina? I don't know. I mean, I saw Kenny wrote a story on that on Sportsnet and the potential, but you listen to the people in Carolina talk about how kind of almost adverse to spending and overspending and really, I mean, you look at Dougie Hamilton as a prime example. Like, they just weren't willing to pay him the money that he wanted in free agency, so they lost him, right? I mean, it's kind of one of those things that this team tries to win a certain way, and their way of doing it is not overspending and not going about it that way. So to see them, potentially pony up $10 million a year to Connor Hellebuck, let's say, isn't really my. It's not what I think that they're going to end up doing. But I do agree. Like, their philosophy has worked to a certain extent, right? They've made the Eastern Final a few times and that sort of thing. But at some point, you got to say, okay, well, we have a really good kind of formula here that gets us far in the playoffs, and we're really good in the regular season, but what is going to push that team over the edge, right? Or like push that team over the hump, and yeah, it's probably going to be kind of going out of that comfort zone on the way that you kind of pay players. But I think at the end of the day, you also have to think, well, maybe is it different if they had Svechnikov, right? I mean, and that's the one. You could say that about every team, right? Every team that loses in the playoffs. We would have been better with this guy, if he wasn't out of the lineup, right? That's just kind of the way it goes. I mean, the Jets will say the same thing about Josh Morrissey. They have said the same thing about Josh Morrissey or whatever. So, to answer your question, I'm not sold on Carolina being the team to go out and just kind of, overspend on all these players just because they lost a playoff series. Like, this has happened before, and they've made kind of not subtle moves, because Pacioretty and those types of players aren't subtle moves, but they're not going out in free. Yeah, but they're not really going out in free agency and really kind of, overspending or winning a bidding war to get big name players. I think they're a great team at finding talent. Like, just think of like a guy like Jordan Martinook or whatever. That guy was a really good player in the playoffs, and they had him on waivers at one point. Nobody even picked him up. So
he made a lot of money for himself.
I just
free agency.
Right. Yeah. So I just think, that there's something about the Hurricanes that's just not the same as a lot of other teams. Whereas like a team like Toronto will go out and they'll buy the best player they can, and maybe two of them. Right. I mean, that's the way that Toronto has worked, at least under Kyle Dubas. But Carolina is a little more methodical in how they do things, and they search for very specific players that will play. That will play well under, fit the mold under, especially under Rob Brindamore's kind of. And like that, to me, that speaks to what the Jets need to do eventually, is once they actually figure out what they want, like what's the vision for this team, and we still don't know an answer to that. But once you actually know how you want your team to play, so one thing that Tampa Bay Lightning are really good at is that they figured out what their team was, and then they also figured out what they wanted their team to play and how what they want to, and then they went out and specifically got those players. They targeted those players. They went and they got them, whether it was the Hagels or the Colemans or whatever, right? And and they went and got those players. I mean, Corey Perry and whoever. You can go down the list of guys that they've been like, okay, like we feel like right. Guys that they feel like they can kind of, these are what we need. We need an energy guy, so they go and get an Esimon who turns. Esimon's even a great example. It's like, okay, well, we just want this guy that can maybe go out there, have some energy and whatever, and then they turn it into a 2-year contract. So, like, I think the one thing that Jets miss overall more than anything here is like knowing exactly what they need and then going out and getting it. And I get it; it's harder to do in this market, but this team needs to build a team the way that championship-winning teams build their teams, and oftentimes it's we need this guy. And we're going to go out and get this guy, and that's what we're doing. Tampa is not a team that's really gone out at the trade deadline and got the biggest name. They've got, part of that is their cap situation, but part of it is just, they're so good at times that they just need to plug a few holes and try and, or even strengthen some of the ones that they already have. So, it's interesting. It's interesting to see how other teams kind of build themselves and kind of where the Jets are maybe kind of lacking in that sense, because we don't really know at this point what the Jets want to be.
Saturday morning, you're watching the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mindell, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg, and our guest from the Winnipeg Sun, Scott Billick, talking about the Winnipeg Jets.
Scotty, 2 weeks ago, you wrote about the 5 storylines to watch this off season on the Winnipeg Sun. One I wanted to ask about was number 5, about the defense. What the Jets are going to do with that young core of guys who are coming up, no longer waiver exempt into Declan Chisholm. Billy Heinola still obviously has the 1 year. What do you see them doing? Because they've got a glut on the left side. Got to figure out what they're going to do with Logan Stanley. And, so how do you see it playing out for next year?
Well, I think Logan Stanley is probably gone, right? I mean, you ask for a trade at the trade deadline, and that gets you what
he stays with the Jets for another 3 years until it's completely done.
That's probably true, but the fact is they played him the game right after, and then they just didn't really play him again, right? Like, I mean, they played him when they had to, obviously, when Morrissey got injured, but I think that ship's probably sailed. So. That opens up a spot, but that doesn't open us up a spot in the top 6 either, right? Because I think we all know that, Dylan Sandberg is at the very least on that third pairing and arguably potentially in the top 4 next year. And I mean, we can go on to Dylan Sandberg probably should have just been playing all year. But this is the thing, right? I mean, this is the same. We're just going to have the same kind of conversation at the moment about guys like Declan Chisholm and Billy Heinola. And the problem with Billy is because he's waiver exempt, and Dave and I were talking about this in the press box during the Winnipeg Ice series, and it's probably the reason why, Villy probably spends another year in the minors if he doesn't get traded, right? It's just because, he has that waiver exempt status, and we know how the Jets like to use that. And the fact that right now, they still have Brendan Dillon, they still have Nate Schmidt. I don't know if they're willing to move a guy like Neil Pionk. And I don't know if they can move a guy like Nate Schmidt just because of his contract. We saw Nate Schmidt this year probably become the team's third pairing defenseman. And kind of full time. Like, I don't think Nate Schmidt really got better this year. And that's a problem because you're paying the guy nearly $6 million a year to be on your third pairing. That's going to be a tough one. And, I love Nate Schmidt. He's a really nice guy. Obviously, everybody, the guy that you see, that fans see, kind of on TV or post game. That's exactly what he's like in real life. Like, nothing really changes there with Nate Schmidt. But, as good as he is as a person, I mean, this is a results based business, and Nate Schmidt got sat one time this year. It was a big storyline. And so I wonder, I mean, is Nate Schmidt a guy that you trade? And the other problem with that is it's funny to me because the Jets have kind of built this kind of, it's probably happened organically at times, but you get a guy like Nate Schmidt to kind of come to Winnipeg and play here. And the idea of trading him almost seems counterintuitive to kind of what you're trying to do is getting guys to want to be in Winnipeg and that sort of thing. And so if you just trade them off, but at the end of the day, I mean, the loyalty and that sort of thing has to come secondary to them wanting to win. And moving a guy like Nate Schmidt opens the door for Declan. It opens the door for potentially, a good camp battle with him and with Declan and Villy. And there's legitimately a spot in the NHL left over for those guys. And, that was one of the things this year with Dylan Samberg and all that, and Logan Stanley and Villy at one point was there was a spot open, but it felt like that battle went on all year long. And by the time that Dylan Samberg finally took it over, it was so late in the season, right? And you're just you'd like to have a little more runway as a young player just to kind of get your kind of feet under you. And I thought Dylan Samberg handled it so well. The ups and downs, being sat, watching Logan Stanley play over you some nights, or Villy, earlier in the season, at least on some nights. So
do the Jets have to consider moving him, Scotty? Declan Chisholm. Yeah. I was just going to say, I think, Dave would obviously know much better because he's watched Declan Chisholm probably more than anybody, period. I'm not joking. He knows Declan Chisholm's game, in and out. He's, Dave, 23 years old now. I think you would agree that Chisholm is ahead of Heinola. But you know what I mean, Scotty? Obviously, this isn't a Sami Niku situation because Sami Niku doesn't have the ceiling that Ville Heinola has. But it seems like unless you trade one of Neil Pionk, Nate Schmidt, or Brendan Dillon, it's going to be the same situation again. And I feel like, again, I'm not saying that Ville Heinola is Miro Heiskanen. I'm not saying that, he's an established top 20 defenseman in the NHL. But if you don't think that he's ready at this point, and you still don't think Declan Chisholm is ready at this point, you're going to have another situation where a guy just doesn't get that NHL experience. So is that not on the table right now that you're going to move on from Ville Heinola if you're not going to move one of those veteran defensemen?
100%. And I think one of the things with Ville is so his future might even be tied to the futures of Pierre-Luc Dubois or Scheifele or somebody that you trade at potentially the draft even, or before the draft, where you're okay, we're trying to make this deal work, and who knows? Does Ville Heinola become a part of a Blake Wheeler trade that sheds the entire contract of Blake Wheeler off the Winnipeg Jets roster to a team that can take him for that final year of his contract, right? The sweetener, so to speak. And I know some fans kind of balk at the idea that you're going to have to you're not going to get anything in return for Blake Wheeler. But I mean, the return for Blake Wheeler is the cap space you free up, right? So, and so So do you have to do you trade a guy like Villy to an Arizona or I don't know, a Chicago, somebody who can eat that contract for the next year and the entirety of it? I don't know. But I think you kind of have to crap or get off the pot with Villy. Like, at what point? You know, like, I mean, I get it. I mean, this is a Jets team that prides itself on team control. Just not if you're Eric Comrie or Axel Johnson Fialbi, right? But but this is a team that, you know, historically has prided itself on team control, and you know, so that's often meant, you know, some guys stay in the minors a lot longer than maybe they should be, or at least a lot of people want them to be. But yeah, I mean, what are you gonna like? If you're Villy, like, it just kills a guy's confidence, doesn't it? Like, does that not what it does? Like, if Villy goes in the next season without even really a good, you know, having a sniff at winning a roster spot, like, because you haven't changed much on your blue line, or you know, like, or if Declan Chisholm's just going to be played over you because of the fact, like, you know, it could be merit, of course, but you know, if it's just because one guy doesn't have the roster or the waiver exemption, I mean, that's how many hits, if you're really handling, are you going to take before you're like, okay, like, I mean, I need to try somewhere else. And, you know, I see some people in the chat saying, you know, Villy's a lot like Sammy. I'm like, no, there's no chance of that. And I'll tell people why quickly. Villy Heinola, after this end of the season, I watched this thing. Dave was telling me to watch it after the thing, the Moose kind of availability. And, you know, you can tell that Villy, and I had a good chat with Villy in Buffalo, I want to say it was this year, when he got back into the lineup for one game. But my best chat that I had about Villy was with Brendan Dillon, and talking, because Brendan Dillon was sort of taking Villy under his wing while he was up in the NHL. And, you know, Brendan came through the same way in a sense that, you know, he had to work out of the AHL and make it into the NHL and work his way into the league and being a mainstay. So Villy was really kind of tapping into kind of Brendan Dillon and the way that he kind of came up in the league. And so that was like that showed to me, like, that showed way more than Sammy Niku ever showed to me. Right, like, the one thing about Sammy Niku, and you know, we can say, you know, he was a great guy, and in you know, in the AHL, won the AHL, what was it, Rookie of the Year and Defenseman of the Year, whatever it was, but he didn't have the drive, and I see the drive in Villy, right? Like, that's the difference. Villy has come to camp bigger, I would say, every year. This year especially, like, I looked at Villy Heinola, like, yeah, this guy put on some, you know, some weight, and it might not be the weight maybe required to be a heavy defenseman in the NHL, but I don't think Villy's ever going to be that. But you can see Villy, the way that he comes in every year, like, he's trying to do what I think is being asked of him, whether it's bulking up or becoming a smarter defensive player or whatever. Like, I think you see those things. So, but the way that Brendan Dillon kind of talked about Villy, like, it felt to me that Villy was in the right headspace, even though he wasn't. And he had the right people around him to kind of deal with the ups and downs of kind of, you know, toiling in the minors and being that kind of young guy that just hasn't gotten that maybe that full-time opportunity just yet. So that's the one thing that's different about him and Sammy. And so I think the Jets realize that too. Like, I do wonder at the end of the day, it just becomes this almost cyclical thing with the Jets where they, you know, they just leave guys around because they have the chance to do it. And now with Declan coming up, you have to find a spot for him, or you know, likely you're going to lose him on waivers, right? And it's just not going to work. So I don't know. I'm curious to see what they do, because, like, I look at this defense and they ran it back this year with them, because I think the way that Cheveldayoff saw last season, like, not this past one, but the one before where they missed the playoffs, it's like, okay, well, you lose your head coach of 8 years midway through the season, and then they just never get it together under Dave Lowry.
Right.
So you bring a new head coach in, but again, we're still in the same spot. We're still asking a lot of the same questions at the end of this season as we were last year. And so, to me, something has to give on the blue line, but I'm not entirely sure what it is. And that's part of the problem, because what you think is the best move for the Jets on the blue line might be the hardest one to make. And
That's a good point.
And so, yeah, and that's just like, it's really just kind of the reality. If you wanted to move Nate Schmidt or Brendan Dillon, because those are probably the two. Well, you want to probably move Nate Schmidt just because of his contract, and Brendan Dillon's garnered interest throughout his time here in Winnipeg, trade deadlines and off seasons and whatnot. So I think you can move a guy like Brendan Dillon, but Brendan Dillon, to me, was one of their best playoff defensemen in terms of the way that he kind of turned up. Well, that's what I mean. It doesn't, right? I mean, you're and what's that? There's like a phrase, but
addition by subtraction.
Yeah, like you're right. You're not making your team better by getting rid of one of your guys that you can really count on. And Brendan Dillon is sort of the guy in the playoffs. Like that's almost how you want your team to be: tenacious, heavy, hit, checking. We're seeing this in all these series. Like, the big hits, all these things, they make a difference. Look at the hit that what's his name put on Slavin there. Like that was just a gnarly hit. Bennett, right? Like the Jets miss players like that. They don't have a Sam Bennett in the playoffs. They don't have a Matthew Tkachuk style player, right? Where like you guys like not everybody's gonna have a Matthew Tkachuk, but it's just the past, like every shift that Matthew Tkachuk plays, you could probably look back and point to one thing that he did on that shift, whether it was piss a guy off by a little slash here or a nice hit or obviously a goal or something like that. But I think there's a lot of that, and so it's interesting, and it really takes me back to like I wish Kevin Cheveldayoff would have told fans something about this team that they were looking to do. Like, what do they want to become? Because we're 12 years into, we're going into year 13 of Kevin Cheveldayoff, and I still don't know what he wants this team to look like, and I'm not sure if fans know it, if you guys know it. Or anything else, so it's hard to. Yes, yeah.
I'm not sure he knows it aside from, this guy was available, so we acquired him, and this guy was available, so we acquired him, and we're going to hopefully, melt the pieces together.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Some of this has been just like, man, I really hope these guys kind of like come together and band together at some point, because that's kind of what they've.
What's their overarching philosophy?
Well, yeah, like a lot of this is eggs basket on the core that they've had and that sort of thing. But I think they'd have no choice this summer but to blow that up, and part of it at least. And so, but we said that before too, right? We said, they don't have no choice but to do this or that, and nothing end up happening. So we'll see. I mean, I think stuff still has to happen because you can't lose guys like Scheifele and Hellebuck and Dubois and those guys for free. We've seen how detrimental that can be to teams like, let's say, Columbus or whatever, when they decided they'd keep their guys and try and make the playoffs and didn't. And they did, but then they got bounced in the first round, and then that's it. All your big name players are gone for free, and you don't have anything, and you're just trying to rebuild from there. So it's
maybe that'll be how the Jets get to a rebuilding phase.
It would be funny if the Jets just kind of get forced into a rebuild because, that's the only option left, because that's kind of what they've done with, Jacob Trouba or Andrew Kopp, right? Like you're kind of forced into this kind of corner where you really only have one option, and that's to do the thing that you're forced into doing, whatever that might be, trading a guy, whatever. So, yeah, it's certainly setting up for an interesting offseason, but I don't know what's going to happen.
It's about 2 months. It's May 27th. Usually the NHL world shuts down by the end of July. So, you got about a 2-month window now where things are going to start picking up, and the shape of the 23-24 Jets will become more apparent to everybody. Scott Billick from the Winnipeg Sun, our good friend. Scotty, we'll let you get on with your weekend. Thank you, brother.
Have fun with those errands, Scotty.
Yeah, will too. Yeah, thanks, guys. Yeah, and then the carpet's not for sale. I know there's the chat. I don't know if people are watching. This is stretching across all the shows.
All I know is you might have a Brady jersey behind you, but you're the real goat, Scott.
Is that a euphemism? I don't understand. The carpet is not for sale.
Do you see the rolled up carpet?
I see a little bit of an area rug in the corner there.
Everybody's like, I want to buy that carpet. Yesterday, I think they had a bidding war, and I was on Huss's show, and they had like a bidding war. Yeah, there we go. How many bodies? Yeah, exactly. Great.
It's a Persian rug, right?
What? It's a Persian rug. I only roll that out for special times. So, anyways,
Thank you, Scotty.
I'm out of here.
Bye.
Have a good
Bye.
night.
Cheers, Scotty.
There he goes.
Bye.
Scott Billick joining us this morning on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. When we come back, more Jets talk, more playoff talk. We have Dave McCarthy joining us at the bottom of the hour for a look around the NHL. Much more to come. Don't go anywhere. It's a Saturday morning. We're live on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hi, Ez. A strange question for you. But why are you lying on the ground being crushed by a piano?
Well, Drew, I definitely tried to carry this baby grand piano down the stairs by myself, and somehow I failed miserably.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, that was a silly question on my part. My apologies. Would you like me to call Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage to help you move the piano? They are the most experienced piano moving company in Winnipeg, after all.
Yes, please call Rollies and hurry. This piano is very, very heavy.
Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage offers stress-free residential moving services while taking great care of your personal belongings, including your piano. At Rolly's, no job is too big or too small. For more information, visit rollies.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go,
We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs from restorative to cosmetic dentistry and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
Boston Pizza harnessed Fanalytics to help optimize no-look dipping. Ooh, making adjustments so you can stay focused on the game. The playoffs at Boston Pizza, powered by Fanalytics.
10:15. Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mindell, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg with you. Big thanks to Scott Billick for joining us on the program for an always interesting discussion regarding the Winnipeg Jets, regarding the offseason for this team. As I mentioned, really about a 2-month window now that the Jets are in to try and reshape this roster, if they're going to reshape this roster to get ready for the 2023-2024 season. Will be fascinating. And you know, I think Scott brings up, you know, interesting points, and they're not necessarily unique points or points that haven't been discussed yet, but it's just the ongoing uncertainty and the ongoing confusion as to what this team is going to look like and what this team's, you know, MO is going to be for this offseason. You know, there's just so, it's just so unclear what the approach is. And you know, we've talked about it, how this isn't great for the fans and this isn't great for selling season tickets, and that it's, you know, from our perspective, you know, it's a detriment to True North's efforts to put more butts in their seats at upcoming games for the next season. But it always gets brought up because it's a constant topic of conversation, and there's no answer, and the Jets refuse to provide that answer. So you're just left trying to fill in the blanks, Dave. You're trying to, you know, put, you know, some pieces together, and you're trying to, you know, play matchmaker, and you're trying to play prognosticator about how things are going to work out. But that doesn't really sell very many tickets in the interim, does it?
No, it does not. Of course, it leaves you trying to piece together a roster, and that's ultimately what we've been hearing the Jets don't want to do, right, Ezzy? They don't want to do the whole rebuild thing. They want to retool. It's the magic New York Rangers formula. Magic, I say, because you replace Henrik Lundqvist with Shesterkin, and suddenly you've got yourself an amazing goaltender, a Hall of Fame goaltender, to an incredible young goaltender of the future.
Where's the Jets' first and second overall picks, though, Dave?
Yeah, exactly. They don't have quite that magic, Ezzy. But yeah, no, I mean, Drew, you're right, and that's what we've been talking about, is that there is a lot of lack in this lineup, and so if you're going to go from a position of strength,
Eddie Lack.
No Eddie Lack. He's back in Sweden, I believe, although he does do a lot of stuff still. But regardless,
for the Moose for at least 1 year, maybe a couple.
Yeah, we called him the Lacker back in the day. But the point is that we never called him the Lacker, for the record. So the point is that, it's a tough situation. And again, the only area of surplus on this entire Jets roster is the left side defensive one, in terms of you have established guys in Morrissey, Sandberg, and Dillon, and that's a very good left side of the defense where nobody's maligning it or complaining it. So you've got those three guys. That's perfect. Then your right side, of course, could use some work. You don't have the depth yet because a lot of the guys who are coming up are younger prospects who are going to need a few years with the Moose or overseas. And then your question becomes, what do you do with those extra guys? I know I thank Tracy for letting Rollies know that IC sent them to her, from her to them.
Would you like me to try that? Because you seem to be choking on struggling on your words there.
Well, because Drew, I already thanked Tracy in the chat, so you're bringing that up.
Is Tracy going to have us over for a housewarming party? Because I'll bring the chips.
Well,
well, I'm pretty sure that she has no interest in having us over.
And the dip. I can bring the dip as well, Drew. You know that I like a nice dip.
You do enjoy a good dip. There's no question.
Anyways, the point I'm trying to make is that you need to just deal with what you have, which is again a surplus of left side defensemen and a need to augment the right side, which we've talked about, and whether that's through a trade of one of your top guns to improve and give that lineup a little bit of a shift. Because then again, if you have, look, we always know you need a lot of defense. So that is why the Jets like to have those guys stockpiled on the Moose, especially guys who are waiver exempt, because it gives you the opportunity, if there are injuries, to say, okay, well, we got an injury here. We're going to be able to call up or use player X. But ultimately, again, from a Jets perspective, you do need to just buttress this team and say, how are we going to, ensure that we have the depth and we're not lacking? Look, Nikolai Ehlers goes down for however many games you lose them. Cole Perfetti goes down for however many games you lose them. I mean, those are big hits to a team, losing players in their top six, right? And that's the question, is how do you replace them? Is Daniel Torgerson ready to jump up? Is Henry Nikkanen ready to jump up? Nikita Chibrikov, is he ready to jump up? And the answer, of course, is no, I don't think any of those guys are ready to jump up. So you don't really have the defensive guys who are ready and are looking to make that jump to the NHL level. You don't necessarily have the forwards yet, because I think they're probably at least a year away, especially in Chibrikov's case, because he hasn't even played a game in North America here yet. But the fact of the matter is, you've got those guys who are young, are hungry. But again, like I said, I don't think it's always with the Jets, it's always about that overlap. And are you going to have the timing right, so you can replace some of those guys to fill needs and then have a guy come up and play? Now, the reality right now, as I've just outlined, is that you have it on the left side of your defense, Ezzy, but you don't really have it in the forward groups yet, and you don't necessarily have it on the right side yet. So how do you fill those needs, Ez? You maybe have to make a trade or two to augment your team.
Sure. And obviously the Nino Niederreiter acquisition is huge, because that's exactly what you're talking about, right? You only had to give up a draft pick. You didn't have to give up a prospect or a roster player. And Niederreiter is a guy, at the very least, is going to be in your top 9 and can play on the second line, even the first line, right, Dave? So I think, Niederreiter, that's something to mention here. He's going to be a big part, we think, of the top 6, or maybe even play on the third line with like Lowry and Barron, for example, right? But I think, what Drew's asking, the reason why, in addition to the fact that we've never seen this many high-profile Jets all potentially on the trade block at the same time, right? Like, you're talking about your franchise center when you're talking about Scheifele, you're talking about your franchise goaltender when you're talking about Hellebuck, and you're talking about your 2 center in Dubois. And obviously Wheeler is with Scheifele in terms of, they have been that core of this team for the last 12 years. I mean, Scheifele obviously, came into the league a couple years after the Jets came back. But it's that, and then it's coupled with the fact that you have players that you're not sure what their contract status is. Like, we have absolutely no idea, how much Hellebuck's agent has talked to Chevy and Larry Sims, right? Like, we don't know, is a 5 or 6 year contract on the table for Mark Scheifele, right? Like, we don't know that. Blake Wheeler's the only guy that doesn't fit into that type of category, right? Wheeler's not getting a long-term contract. If he did get another contract from the Jets, it would be probably for 1 or 2 years.
He's not getting another contract.
That's what we think, right? So, when you're talking about Dubois, Scheifele, and Hellebuck, the contract status is huge. The Jets aren't going to be able to sign all 3 of those players to long-term contracts, right? So that's what is complicating things. In addition to the fact, as you guys know, and as everybody watching and listening knows, Dubois has made it clear that he wants to be traded to one team. So again, we don't know if anything's changed since a year ago, but everything we've heard, right, is that PLD wants to go to Montreal. He's from Quebec. He wants to play in his home province, right? So that's complicating things. So you hear that, the New Jersey Devils might have to be after Hellebuck, or the Carolina Hurricanes might be after Hellebuck, or maybe even the Boston Bruins, the Detroit Red Wings, right? Like, you could probably name another 5 or 6 teams, but we have absolutely no idea if that team could even work, considering that the Jets most likely would have to have a goaltender coming back. Like, what's the likelihood, guys, that the Jets trade Hellebuck for, let's say, a roster player, whether that's a forward or defenseman, a prospect, and let's say a draft pick, and then they go out and they acquire a goaltender on the UFA market? Like, first off, that's risky, because you have to, be pretty certain that you have a good chance of signing that UFA goaltender. So most likely a goaltender is going to have to come back if you're trading Hellebuck. And same thing goes for Scheifele Dubois. You have to have a center coming back.
If you're trading Hellebuck, and again, you have to figure out what his future is. So if you're trading Hellebuck, you have to completely reshape. And you should reshape how you play regardless, even if you keep Hellebuck. It's evident that you cannot just ride a goalie all season long. Eventually that goalie wears out. So having a strategy of Connor Hellebuck and then hope and pray just doesn't work on a for any longer than the regular season.
That only works for Florida, right? Bob, hope and pray. And that's, I'm obviously joking.
That's happening right now. What Bobrovsky's doing is incredible, but it just as easily could run out in game 1 of the Stanley Cup final.
Exactly. Yeah.
So again, the Jets.
It's also very reminiscent of what Holtby did for the Capitals, where he didn't even start as the Capitals goaltender of the playoffs, got in, played phenomenal. They win the Stanley Cup, and then of course he's dealt, and his decline is there.
Right, but you're looking at this Jets team. They really need to. They need to re-examine how they're built top to bottom, because they're clearly not as good a team 1 through 12 up front, 1 through 6 on the back end, and as the teams that are currently still playing in the Stanley Cup Finals. And I know injuries this and injuries that, but you can't tell me that they are built for playoff hockey. They're not even built for that much regular season success, as we saw. They faded pretty damn quickly there when the games got going. Don't believe me, believe the head coach that said basically the same thing. So if you're not built for success, what are you built for? Or if you're not built for Stanley Cup level of success, what are you built for?
Well, since 2019, Drew, you're right. Since 2019, this team has been built to be a first-round exit team, right?
Yes.
Like, the bubble was the only time that they've had any success since that 2017-18 run, which we all agree was an incredible run. The Jets almost got to the Stanley Cup final, obviously ran into Marc-Andre Fleury and the Golden Knights. But, since 2019, it's been one and done against the Blues. It's been one and done versus the Golden Knights, right? So, right now this team isn't built for a long playoff run. So, and I think you could point to—
if you're not built for a long playoff run, then you're not really being built properly. Nobody wants to drive a car that only works within the city, and once you have to get up to highway driving speed, the car falls apart. It just doesn't, and that's what the Jets are built for right now. They're built for—
I just want a Tesla.
Okay, well, that's your business. I mean, again,
I have a birthday coming up, Drew. Maybe you can buy me one.
I'm not really, but you're really nailing your references of all those who are a little bit controversial, I'd say, with some of their takes between your Kyrie Irving comment and now your Tesla Elon Musk comment. Is he
controversial? I guess he is pretty controversial.
He's pretty controversial. You might want to brush up on some of the current affairs every now and
I
then.
haven't been following. I mean, I'm on Twitter, but I don't really pay attention. I don't follow Elon Musk.
Yeah, probably for
but
the better.
I'll take your word for it. But
you can
Teslas are still cool cars. I mean, I wasn't saying that Elon Musk is a great guy. I'm just saying that I think it would be cool to drive a Tesla. That's all I'm
sure
saying.
You can get a Tesla if you want one. I mean, I
can't afford one. I don't have that Mindell type of money. What are you talking about?
Put your mind together. You know, figure out a plan, and I'm sure you too can drive a Tesla.
I'm a Nissan Sentra driver, Drew. I don't drive a Lambo like you.
My point being, if you would shut up for a second, my point being, Dave, I'll mute Ezzy and you can talk now, is that, to my analogy there, I just still don't know what the Jets are built for or what the end game is for how the Winnipeg Jets currently are. It just seems like they're a bunch of pieces that they put together, as we talked about with Scott. It's like watching me make a cake. Well, I don't know how to make a cake, so I'm going to take this from the cupboard. I'll add a little vanilla, and I'll add some flour, and I'll add some chocolate. What's that, tapioca? Sure, we'll throw some tapioca in there.
We have leftover Costco cake from Ariella's birthday, Drew. I'll drop it off after the show.
I thought we muted him, but to Dave, so I think you understand what my point is that they're just a mix of pieces with no actual overarching strategy that's evident to me.
Sure. I mean, and again, I think that was part of what we asked, of Kevin Cheveldayoff was what was the vision? What is the vision of this team? How are you going to, how are you going to bake that cake and make it look and taste spectacular? Because you don't want to eat something.
Tom Lynn will tell you how to bake a cake, Drew. I mean, Dave.
You don't want to just have something that's just going to be nothing but no joy. There won't be any joy in eating that cake. It'll just be empty calories. So that's what Jets fans are looking for is to see how you're going to compile this team and how you're going to make it do what it's able to do. You can't rest on your laurels and say, well, you know what, in 17-18, we went to the Western Conference Finals. That was a long time ago. And again, you had success against the Edmonton Oilers, and nobody's going to complain about that. Nobody in Winnipeg is going to complain about sweeping the Edmonton Oilers in a playoff series. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you can't even point to last year, even though the Jets didn't make the playoffs. But I'm saying, even last year is too long when you're not having success. And that's why, people talk about the Carolina Hurricanes. That's great that you have, all these conference finals appearance and sure, you're making money, but ultimately, are you winning a Stanley Cup? And you're not. And so the Tampa Bay Lightning, they can point to their success and say, well, we have cups behind us. You can say they're bubble cups, but the reality is they have the Stanley Cup pedigree. All these other teams don't. And so, yeah, you're right, Drew. I think it becomes a function of what are you going to do? Enough with this nonsense about this team. You can't build a team in Winnipeg. You can build a team in Winnipeg. You just have to figure out the way you're going to do it, have a plan. And again, there's no obligation for Kevin Cheveldayoff to say outline his plan for everyone. I think I've had a lot of people asking me on Twitter and other formula or other social media, how are the Jets going to do this? And I said, ultimately, in my mind, I think what Kevin Cheveldayoff is trying to do right now is not do anything. He's going to create some distance between the end of season media availability. So that is, out of people's minds to give himself a little bit of latitude, because I think he lost a lot of it based on the way the end of season media went here in Winnipeg.
I see that Dave McCarthy is getting ready to join us. We'll go to break and then we'll bring Dave in. What you're watching, the Illegal Curve Hockey Show, Saturday morning. We're live on YouTube and our social media platforms.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hi, Ez. A strange question for you. But why are you lying on the ground being crushed by a piano?
Well, Drew, I definitely tried to carry this baby grand piano down the stairs by myself, and somehow I failed miserably.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, that was a silly question on my part. My apologies. Would you like me to call Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage to help you move the piano? They are the most experienced piano moving company in Winnipeg, after all.
Yes, please call Rollies and hurry. This piano is very, very heavy.
Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage offers stress-free residential moving services while taking great care of your personal belongings, including your piano. At Rolly's, no job is too big or too small. For more information, visit rollys.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go,
"We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?"
"I sure do."
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs from restorative to cosmetic dentistry and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
Boston Pizza harnessed Fanalytics to help optimize no-look dipping. Ooh, making adjustments so you can stay focused on the game. The playoffs at Boston Pizza, powered by Fanalytics.
Bottom of the hour. Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mindell, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg with you. We are pleased to welcome to the program Dave McCarthy, always sporting a chapeau that makes me more than a little jealous, always joining us from the Garden. Dave, good morning. Thanks very much for joining us. How are things?
Good, Drew. I think you could pull one of these off, buddy. You just gotta go down that road and give it a try.
I do have one, and I've worn it on occasion. I don't wear it all the time, but it is a fixture as part of your appearances here on the show that you always are sporting a high-quality hat. I like that you're outside and wearing the hat because I'm of the belief that hats being worn inside is a fashion faux pas. Unfortunately, both Dave and Ezzy are not as couth as we are.
Even if it's an illegal curve hat? Come on, Drew.
Don't wear a hat inside. That is a fashion rule. That is something you should take to heart. No hats inside. Dave, do you agree with me? Yes or no?
I have to say no. I think hats inside can be well worn if the appropriate time is upon us. So no, I'm not as rigid as you are, Drew, when it comes to fashion rules, I guess. I think if you want to be adventurous nowadays, if you walk around with a confidence, you can pull anything off you want.
Well, Dave, thanks for joining us. We really appreciated your appearance here on the show.
Well, Dave is the stylish one, and Dave, maybe we could say like no hats at the dinner table, or like no hats if you're eating out. I mean, depending on where you're eating. I mean, if you're eating at McDonald's, then that's one thing. But if you're at a nice restaurant, you can't wear a ball cap. But I think wearing a hat indoors, Drew, is fine as long as you're not eating.
I'm gonna look up the rules of fashion, and we can discuss this again at a later date and time. But Dave, obviously, we brought you on to talk a little bit about some hockey, some Stanley Cup Finals. We got one team in there with the Florida Panthers, and of course, the Vegas Golden Knights could join them later tonight. We have all the news coming out of Toronto, where certainly upheaval would be the name of the game within the Maple Leafs organization at the moment. With the on-ice stuff first, though, watching what the Florida Panthers are doing and the way that they were able to, defeat the Carolina Hurricanes, and before that the Leafs, and before that the Bruins. Do you think that they're maybe exemplifying a new approach for other teams to take on in terms of roster building, or is this just a function of they have a goalie who's playing out of his mind right now?
Yeah, I don't think it's a new approach by any stretch. I think, if anything, it's harkening back to my point that I've been making for years, is that playoff hockey is simple, guys. Like, it really isn't a case of trying to reinvent the wheel. It's risk mitigation. It's simple hockey. It's get good goaltending, as you pointed out, and it's get timely scoring. And that's really what it comes down to time and again, each and every single year. I think they're just playing right now a brand of hockey that is really effective. I mean, it helps when you've got a guy playing between the pipes who is playing otherworldly. Maybe the best goaltending in the playoffs that I've seen in 20 years, maybe since Jean-Sebastien Giguère. But you look at the way Florida plays, they're not really doing a lot that puts themselves in great risk. They're not beating themselves. You look at, and obviously the fact that Bobrovsky is coming up with stops, keeps some guys out of the movie every now and again. But you look at other teams in the conference finals, like Dallas, I think, at times has really beaten themselves with some poor plays defensively that have put them in a tight spot. So, you look at Florida, I don't see them making too many mistakes where they end up beating themselves. I just think they're playing a really smart, straight ahead style of hockey that tends to have success at this time of the year.
I agree with you 100% there, Dave. And I wanted to get back to the Vegas-Dallas series, right? Because obviously, it could have gone the other way and we could have been talking about double sweeps. And I can't remember the last time that happened, but I don't think it's happened in a very long time. But, this series, you've got 3 of the 4 games that have gone to overtime. And obviously game 3, Golden Knights won 4-0. So that's, I guess, the outlier there. I guess 2-part question. I wanted to ask, if you think there's a chance. I mean, there obviously always is a chance that the Stars could come back, and make this a series. They would obviously have to start with game 5, right? But if you're the Florida Panthers, are you hoping that these 2 teams push this to 6 or 7 games, or do you want this to end? I don't know if you've kind of thought about that or talked about that on Sirius XM and NHL, I'm sure, because, if you're the Florida Panthers, you're sitting idle for quite a while there.
Yeah, I'd be okay with the Stanley Cup Final starting on Wednesday if Vegas wins tonight. I mean, that's pretty much a full week off. Beyond that, you're right. You're sitting around for 10 days, which is quite long. If anything, just to fire it back up again, sort of recapture the momentum that they've clearly found since going down 3-1 against Boston. They've been really in a nice roll, right? They rolled right into the second round. I think they only had 1 day off between those series. After sweeping the Leafs, I forget, they had a few more days off, but still not that many. 10 days, it's like you're starting up a new season again. Is right? For real.
Yeah.
It feels like you went away on vacation, you came back, and now here we go again. It's kind of like the bye week in the middle of the year. Around the All-Star break, where you come in, and it really does feel like starting a new season. So will Sergei Bobrovsky's play still be at the same level? Or will that magic elixir have run out? Will he just go back to decent Bob as opposed to godly Bob? You never know. I mean, it could happen even if they started the Cup Final on Monday. But my point being, 10 days is a long time to sit around. So I think a week off gives you a pretty good chance to heal up some bumps and bruises. I mean, if you have anything beyond a bump and a bruise that you're playing with at this time of the year, 10 days still is not enough for it to heal. So, I'd rather take a week and then try to get right back rolling again. I think, 10 days off is an awfully long time in between games.
Dave, we got to ask you about what's going on in Toronto. What the heck is going on in Toronto?
Well, I mean, there's a lot to discuss. Any more specific you want to get into? I want to make sure I come up with a fresh take that you guys maybe haven't heard yet. But it is
specifically about Kyle Dubas, of course.
I mean,
Dave doesn't like open-ended questions, Dave.
Look, what I will say is that clearly there was some breakdown between himself and Brendan Shanahan, and I'd really like to know what happened between the time on the weekend, I guess 2 weeks ago now, when it seemed like they had a deal in place for him to return, and then he went out in his press conference on Monday and said what he said, and then by Thursday night, essentially, Brendan Shanahan had decided to move on, and it just, I still can't quite come to grips with. I mean, we've only heard one side of the story yet, but Brendan Shanahan saying that on the Thursday night, he got a new financial framework from Kyle Dubas' agent, and then an email from Kyle saying he'd like to return. And that struck me as a little strange. I mean, you guys have all worked together for a long, long time. If one of you guys was thinking about leaving the show, I feel like you'd call the other two guys up.
Please let it be Drew.
We don't speak to each other off air. It makes our lives a lot easier.
Oh, so that you're like a band, eh?
That's right.
Yeah.
Three private jets for the three of us.
That's right. I like it. But I found that strange that he says he sent an email, and not a call where he calls him up and says, "Hey, I'd like to return and let's really work this out." Like an email just seems really impersonal. And then even from Brendan Shanahan's standpoint, getting what he said he got from Kyle's agent and basically closing the iron door at that point instead again of calling Kyle up, a guy that theoretically it seemed like he wanted to bring back, and say, "Hey, look, here's what I got from your agent, man. Like, that's just not going to work. That is just not going to work. That is going to be a non-starter. I can't play ball with that with my bosses. But let's have a talk here. Let's try to work something out. Can we come to some sort of an agreement?" I just thought that would have gone on. So I don't know. It seems to an extent like all of this was a convenient way of building in an excuse to say, well, it's time to go in a different direction. I don't know. It just seemed really sudden how everything broke down from wanting him back to I got to move on.
Dave, I want to do a quick follow-up. Do you find the whole NHLPA investigation a little curious that somehow the NHLPA is needing to investigate the ties between Dubas' agent and that sort of thing? Because that just seems very unusual that's coming to light right now, at least.
Yeah. What interesting timing that comes out at that point in time.
Yeah, a little bit. Look, I think the NHLPA looks into a lot of things that we don't really ever hear about. I think the fact that it's Kyle Dubas and everything that went down there draws a little bit more attention to it, and it becomes more likely that we end up hearing about it. So, does anything come of it? I don't know. I mean, it does seem like a little bit of a nothing issue to me.
I think I agree with you that it's probably
like, isn't Bill Zito a former player agent? Like,
yeah, I mean, look, if we're going to start investigating every instance of potential conflicts of interest in the NHL or or tampering or anything like that, that's all there's going to be a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week tampering agency dealing with everything. I mean, this league runs on gossip and quote unquote inappropriate conversations among interested parties. So all of a sudden, I think it was pretty, the timing was not coincidental. I think it's very intriguing that all of a sudden comes up in the week where all this, noise is going on around Dubas and everything else.
Yeah, I don't expect really all that much to come of it. But again, like I say, I think they look into a lot of things that don't necessarily come to light to this extent. But to me, it's really not something that I'm expecting much to come out of it down the road.
Well, so Dave, when did the Leafs announce that they've hired Peter Chiarelli as their new GM?
Well, that's your pick, is it, Ezra?
Just for the comedy of it all, just to watch the entire internet melt down in one false swoop, it would be pretty entertaining.
I'd love to see Jason Botterill there personally, but I think it's probably going to be Trey Living. But I think Botterill is a really, I feel like he's kind of in the same kind of school as Dubas. So I think if they don't hire Botterill, I'm sure Botterill is going to get hired by somebody.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy that, when you look back at his track record in Buffalo, it might look a little bit better now than it did at the time. And oftentimes for general managers, that's what happens, right? You draft, but you're not around long enough for everything that you drafted to develop and start to bear fruit at the NHL level. So, I think history looks a little bit more kindly on Botterill in Buffalo than it did at the time when the team just really wasn't coming together. But I do think at this point, from a Toronto standpoint, that it is Brad Treliving's job to lose. He has experience. He has experience working in Canadian market. He's been around a long, long time. His name carries some level of cachet. I think all of those things, it was suggested by Brendan Shanahan, matter to him this time around. So that's kind of the road that I'd go down. Like I don't think Peter Chiarelli would be my pick right now. I'm surprised, to be honest with you, that Ray Shiro's name hasn't popped up really at all, because he's a guy that does not get bullied around. He has some clout. He's done it for a long time. I kind of like the job that Ray Shiro's done in the places that he's been, and he's just a straight shooter. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever talked to him at all, off the air or whatever. He just lays it on the line and tells you the way he thinks it is. And whether that's to me or you or to people that he's negotiating with, whoever the general manager is in Toronto is going to have two pretty big kettles of fish to handle right off the hop, and that's how you're gonna move forward with Austin Matthews and William Nylander, who are eligible for extensions on July 1st, and those need to get handled properly and negotiated properly. And I think Ray's the guy that will just lay it on the line and say, here's what we're going to pay you. We love you. We want you here, but here's what we can pay you. Here's what we can pay you. We can't really do much more than this. Do we have a deal here or not? I don't think he'd cave. I don't think Brad Treliving necessarily would cave either. And I think that's going to be really important is to get deals done there that not only make the player happy. It's important that you don't want to have a deal that's one-sided, because when someone's not happy, the deal doesn't go well for anybody. But you need the player to be happy, but it also needs to be somewhat beneficial for the club. And the last time around, certainly Mitch Marner, certainly William Nylander, and to an extent Austin Matthews, though he's performed to the contract. Coming out of entry level, could you have gotten, a little bit less than 11.6? Or if not, could you have gotten a few more years of term, right? Like, the players got everything that they wanted and the team really got nothing that they wanted on any case. And it's time the Leafs start to get some deals that look pretty good from a team standpoint, like Colorado did last year with Nathan McKinnon. Yes, he pushed the bar to become the highest paid player, but not by $2.5 million, by $100,000. You look at the deal that Florida just signed with Matty Tkachuk, 8 years, 9.5, not 13.5, 9.5. So that's what I'm saying. It's really important that in Toronto's case, Matthews does return, that it isn't 14.7 and that Nylander isn't 10.5. Like, that's not going to fly at all when it comes to building a team that you can win with.
Do all four return next year, Dave? All four being Matthews, Tavares, Marner, Nylander. Do they return, all four of them? And if they don't, how does that necessarily improve the Leafs?
If they do, well, I'm of the mind right now that they do.
I agree.
Simply because, as you point out, if they don't, your team won't be as good in the short term.
Right.
And they don't have to leave this year. So the Leafs are good business 8 months out of the year. They'd like them to be good business
10 months.
10 months of the year.
Yeah.
But 8 months of the year is pretty good, because there's been a long time in this city where the Leafs have been bad business for 5.5 months. Right. So that's what you have to keep in mind. And when you have a chance to contend, and say what you will, you come back with this team, you fill it out around the edges, you bring in some quality supplementary players, you have a chance. You have a chance. You don't have a team that you're going to hope and scrape and claw to get into the playoffs. You're probably going to get into the playoffs relatively comfortably. And when you do that, you got a chance. So when you have a chance, it's tough to voluntarily go down the road where you now no longer have a chance out of your own doing. So that's sort of how I see it working out. And I guess the counter argument would be, well, how can you possibly bring them back? The city would never stand for it. The city would never stand for it to do it again, run it back again. And to that I say, really? You really don't think the city would stand for it? Because here's how it'll go. Everybody gets, their underpants in a knot after they lose in 5 to the Florida Panthers. You got to blow it up. You got to blow it up. Then you stop talking about it. Then you're into August. And believe it or not, the Leafs actually don't get talked about all that much for like 3 weeks in August. Like, it's kind of an afterthought. and then you come back and, new season again. Here we go. This is going to be the year. And then, training camp opens up and you get a few questions. So, why are you bringing it back yet again? We firmly believe that you look at a lot of teams, Washington and blah, 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 blah. Okay. Everybody nods their head in acceptance. And then 12 games into the year in October, Austin Matthews has 10 goals and Mitch Marner has 19 points. And all the fans he's on Twitter are all like, oh, look at this. Is Austin going to score 60 again? Oh, boy. Is Mitch finally going to get to 100? And that's what it's going to be, right? And that's what it's going to be. And then before you know it, you're into March and it's trade deadline. And how are we going to improve the team and into the playoffs and we take our kicks? So you're not going to come into the season with people in complete denial and running with pitchforks and torches at Maple Leafs Central or head office, whatever, saying demanding trades. It's just not going to happen because they will play well at the beginning of the regular season, and then, like always, all will be forgotten. So I really don't see, to be honest with you, at this point, any one of the four moving.
Interesting. Dave, last question for you here. I know you've been following, going back to Kyle Dubas. I need to bring it full circle back to Kyle Dubas. You've been following, the connections between Dubas and the Penguins. I'm not sure if they've formally met. You might know that. I'm not aware of that, but I think, he is considered the front runner for the new GM of the Pittsburgh Penguins, because obviously the Penguins let Ronnie Hextall and Brian Burke go. I guess for you, does it seem like a foregone conclusion that Dubas is going to be the GM of the Penguins? And I guess the more important second part of that question is, what is that going to say about what he said in that press conference where he made it seem like, if it wasn't going to be the Toronto Maple Leafs and if he was going to step back for family reasons, which obviously, I think you'd agree we all admire, that he was, willing to be that modest and say that, this is taking a toll on his family life. I mean, I can relate to that. A legal curve has definitely taken a big toll on my family life, especially just having to deal with Drew on a weekly basis. But in all seriousness, though, do you think that's going to irk Leafs fans?
Well, I'll tell you what, just if I can for a minute, can we draw reference to that game between Pittsburgh and Chicago in the final week of the regular season where Pittsburgh lost to Chicago? Mm-hmm. And all of the ramifications that have come out of that seemingly relatively innocuous game. I mean, you think about it. Pittsburgh wins there, they make the playoffs. Florida doesn't. Maybe Bill Zito ends up getting fired, right? Because everything that he did didn't work out. They end up missing the playoffs. Maybe Pittsburgh goes on a miraculous run because Sid and Gino and Chris Letang were playing really well this year. Maybe Brian Burke and Ron Hextall are still employed. Who knows? Chicago gets those 2 points. They jump up into third, and then they end up winning the draft lottery. They don't get those 2 points. They're not in the slot that wins the draft. It's bananas.
A series of unfortunate events, right?
The pebble in the ocean, I believe, is the theory you're referencing.
Bananas. And then, maybe Kyle Dubas doesn't get fired. Who knows? Like, literally, who knows? And then we're talking about something entirely different. They got to do a 30 for 30 on a worldwide leader about that game at the end of March between Pittsburgh and Chicago. Does Kyle have the job in Pittsburgh? My understanding is he met with Sidney Crosby, according to multiple reports, this past week. And look, I mean, you're not wheeling into the practice facility and meeting with Sid if they're not real serious about offering you the job.
That would be a big flex if it wasn't the case, right?
Right. I mean, and can you or I get that meeting just to wheel down to Pitt and meet with Sid on a Tuesday night? Like, probably not. So I think there's something to it. Again, according to reports, and I haven't talked to anybody within Pittsburgh's organization. I don't have a lot of connections with the Fenway Sports Group, to be honest with you. But it seems like they're giving him the weekend to consider. I think that he is the odds-on favorite to take the job. And look, I know what he said in his press conference. I don't think it's really all that relevant anymore, because when he said that, he was operating under the assumption that I'm going to either choose to come back to Toronto to work or not at all. But that would have been his decision. Suddenly, Toronto is taken away from him. Now, all bets are off the table. There's no loyalty there anymore, and things change. So if it's an offer that he can't, because look, it seemed like he had talked over with his family and that he was ready to return, right? And that they had gotten to a point as a family where Kyle was ready to work. So there you go, right? Like, that decision had been made. Now I'd like to oh, well, now I can't come back. Okay, well, I'd still like to work. My family and I have agreed that we're ready to go back into the grind again, after talking it out. Okay, well, where's the next job then? So to me, that's how it worked out. So, I get he said it at the time, but I don't think it's something that you have to look at him and say, he said this and now he's doing that. I think circumstances changed from when he said that.
Just one final question here before we let you go. Does it seem like, and again, I know you're saying that you're not completely tapped into the ownership group of the Penguins or necessarily know this, but do you think that it's going to be Dubas Spezza like together? Because it seems like they're a package deal right now.
I don't know about that. I'm not 100% convinced on that by any stretch. I think Jason enjoyed working alongside Kyle, but I don't think that Jason will always work alongside Kyle for the remainder of each of their careers. I don't think that's the case at all. In Spezza's case, I think he likes being close to home here in Toronto, where his family is, his parents are, all of that. I'd be interested to see what happens in Ottawa once that sale ultimately goes through and we figure out what's happening with the management group. Who becomes involved there? Could Daniel Alfredson become involved? If Alfie becomes involved, would there be an avenue for Jason to join that group in a place that's probably a little bit closer to, I guess not really theoretically, other than the fact that it's in the same province. Pittsburgh isn't that far away, but you know what I mean. Could there be an avenue there? So I don't think it's a lock by any stretch that wherever Kyle Dubas ends up, Jason Spezza ends up as well. And remember, Kyle needs to work a lot more than Jason needs to work. If you check both their bank balances, I think Jason's probably doing a little bit better at this point. So I think he's not that Kyle's looking for his next meal, but I don't think Jason's going to necessarily jump into anything right away that he's not comfortable in doing. And look, maybe he is the guy that does want a year off to really truly reinvest in his family, because even though he was close to home, man, he almost seemed like he was at the rink more this year than he was when he played. And he really hasn't been around his family full time for quite some time. So maybe that's the case there, that he got some experience really in every facet of management. Jason Spezza did this past year. He's got that under his belt. Now maybe you take a year and just sort of reinvest in your family, and then reassess your options down the road.
Dave McCarthy, NHL.com, Sirius XM, NHL Radio, Sunday brunch coming up tomorrow. What's in store?
We have got, we're going to look back, obviously, at Game 5 of the Western Conference Final, tee up the Cup Final. Think we're going to have somebody on from the Panthers organization. We're still trying to work out the timing there, so I won't announce any names or anything concrete, but some feelers have been put out, so to speak, to try and get something in the works there. And our good buddy Jason Greger, who brings it every week,
right on
at the top of hour number 2, probably take some phone calls as well, because we're men of the people on the brunch. Open reservations. You know how it goes, guys.
There you go. Looking forward to it. Dave, thanks for this. Get on with your Saturday. We appreciate it.
Thanks, fellas.
Take
Cheers,
care. There
Dave.
he goes. Dave McCarthy, SiriusXM, NHL.com, NHL.com, SiriusXM, NHL Radio is what I meant to say there. How about that? 2 hours flying by on this Saturday morning, gentlemen. Good to see you both. The snap of a finger. We remind you, illegal curve.
I can't snap. I've tried so many times. You know that, Drew. I just can't do it. My fingers and my thumbs, I don't know if they have enough oil or what it is, but I just can't snap.
Can you whistle?
No.
Okay, I can't whistle, but I can snap. I got a good loud snap.
Dave's been to the Whistle Pig.
That is true. In Transcona.
Which is
I can also whistle and snap.
Well, look at you, a multi-talented individual you are there, Mr. Minuk. IllegalCurve.com. It's your destination for all your latest Winnipeg Jets news.
Good Nino Niederreiter article if people want some positivity about Winnipeg. Nino Niederreiter had a nice interview with Aaron Vickers, who's an NHL.com independent correspondent. And so while everyone else is taking a dump on the peg, Nino Niederreiter is saying, no, not quite. And he has
not
a nice
on his
thing
watch.
to say. No, but I mean, look, he's a Swiss guy.
Drew's just taking a dump in the peg.
Yes, there you go. But no, I think that was Scotty Bellick. But the point is that I think that you've got a lot of people are looking for some positivity, and Nino Niederreiter didn't have to say what he said. He didn't need to put those comments out there. He was over in Finland talking at the World Championship. His Swiss team did quite well. They got eliminated, but they did quite well. Canada won. They defeated Moose legend Artur Silovs, who played one game when he was signed during the bubble year.
Can we give a huge shout out to Team Latvia? That's so awesome. Good that Canada beat them in the semis. But I mean, that's the first time Latvia's ever made it to the semifinals.
Playing for a medal.
Yeah, they'll
pretty awesome. First time ever tomorrow.
Most likely against
the U.S. or Germany.
Most likely against Germany, but
Rudolph's the red-nosed Balsers.
But never counted the Germans.
But
anyway, the point is that, if you're looking for some positivity, the Germans. But anyways, if you're looking for some positivity, read that article on illegalcurve.com. We've got that one posted.
And of course, keep it locked.
You can read that. We've got some good links.
There you go. Illegalcurve.com, your destination for all your
Winnipeg
Jets,
is good.
Moose, all that news all week long, of course. Our social media is at Illegal Curve on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. You know where to find us there. We'll be back next Saturday, of course, with another edition of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Big thanks to our sponsors, the Rady JCC, their annual sports dinner coming up on Monday, June the 19th, featuring Chelios, Belfour, and JR Jeremy Roenick. Tickets available, radyjcc.com. Our friends at Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club, Matthew Broussard next week, all sold out. Jay Muse, Jay from Jay and Silent Bob, he's been there all weekend long, all sold out there. Linden Market Dental Center, Zappia Group Realty, Betway, they're the title sponsor of the Illegal Curve post-game show. That'll be back, of course, come 2023-24 NHL season. Our friends at Tough Duck, Boston Pizza. As I said, stay tuned. More info about IC Live at Boston Pizza next year. Seagram's, Rollies Transfer, Grid Park, and The Keg support these fine businesses because of their continued support of Illegal Curve Hockey. Big thanks to Scotty Bilks. Big thanks to Dave McCarthy. If you missed any of it, the immediate replay on our YouTube channel, and of course the podcast available shortly thereafter. Be sure to smash the like button, rate us, review us, let us know what you think of the program, both on YouTube and of course on iTunes as well. For Dave Minuk, for Ezra Ginsburg, I'm your host, Drew Mindell. There you go. Yes, congratulations. Good luck to the Sea Bears later tonight. Good luck to the Bombers. Exhibition season starts today as well for the CFL, for the Bombers. I am Drew Mindell. This is the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. If it's Saturday, it's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.